Closed, Chair.
The open meeting, and we move now to item 7.1.3, which is 141 Hampton Road, Hobart alterations. This is Melrose on the corner of Wilmot and Hampton Road. I open the item for discussion. It's on page 224.
I'm happy to move that, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Barakis. It looks like from the Heritage Officer's perspective, it has the right ticks, as it does with the Heritage Council. No further discussion? Then I'll put that. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Item is carried unanimously. Item 7.1.4 is 18 Ascot Avenue, so it's two multiple dwellings and tree removals, page 276.
Insanely steep block of land, but yeah,
So,
everyone else is built on the same sort of slope. Oh wow, that is.
does that mean that you're moving?
Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harvey. Any further discussion?
Not designed for old people either.
So having seen a particular development virtually every day since we approved it at 24 Lower Jordan Hill Road, and that very steep driveway is getting built very, very slowly. This is a very steep block. Does everything from an engineering and safety perspective stack up? I mean, it draws on the performance criteria, doesn't it?
Look, it does, and our engineers are very experienced when it comes to steep driveways, and we're very careful to ensure conditions are watertight in ensuring that the final working drawings are compliant. I'm confident in our ability to ensure compliance with the relevant standards.
Further discussion? No, I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried unanimously. Item 7.1.5 is 7 Ribbon Gum Court, Mount Nelson, alterations and extensions. I'll open the item for discussion.
I'm happy to move the recommendation, Chair.
Thanks, Alderman Briscoe. Discussion? Just a question, Director. Obviously there were concerns about overshadowing and impact. Obviously it's changed since it was first. Well, the concerns of the neighbours have been brought to our attention. So it again seems to work given what we have before us.
Yeah, look, we've it's been reviewed by our officers, and we're still satisfied that it achieves compliance with the performance criteria. Look, we understand the concerns of the neighbours, but we're reasonably satisfied that the greatest impact is on bedrooms, not living rooms, and so that's where the scheme allows that sort of impact, so we're reasonably comfortable with the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Chair. So that's just going off from that, Director. That's even with, I suppose, the suggestions that was put forward by the representative about the lot, the house being, the neighbouring house being designed to shine through into the living room. But that is even considering that.
That is considering that. It is the corridor. The entrance is set back in and underneath, and it's a fairly long corridor. So, look, there will be some impact in winter time into that courtyard entry point, but at other times of the year, that impact will be, they still will be able to access light into that corridor.
So, through you, Chair, what's the provisions for looking at the neighbour's design? So if you build something
for a specific way to give us certain performance, that's contingent on the neighbouring blocks doing something conventional rather than, non-conventional. How is that protected? We're looking at how we can protect sunlight for clotheslines and backyards and light penetration. I'm just concerned that if you encourage design, architectural design that provides certain, benefits with regard to sunlight and light and things, and then it's impacted by neighbours.
Well, the adjacent property does have certain rights in terms of access to reasonable amounts of sunlight to living areas and open space. Now, we are satisfied that the proposal does not impinge, impact on those rights.
But I guess it's the design. It kind of eliminates your advantages of certain designs. It comes back to average rather than exceptional.
Yeah, I suppose it does. The line is drawn at a lowest common denominator, I suppose. It's not espousing, the gold-plated access to, all day sunlight. But I'd have to say that, the neighbouring property will, as I said, not their living rooms and their open space in the main will not result or not be affected significantly by this proposal.
Otherwise, you would have refused it.
Otherwise, we would have been very quick to recommend refusal.
Okay, thank you. Do we have, has somebody moved this?
Yes, I do.
Oh, Alderman Briscoe, thank you. So, Councillor Coates?
Nothing actually directly on this, just noticing the TV's flicked off. Did we lose Councillor Sherlock?
Uh,
Yep. Okay, yep.
Thank you. No further discussion? Okay, I'll put the motion for approval. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Items carried. Should we go to item, just reports first. So 8.1 is
So moved.
delegated decision report. Thank you, Alderman Briscoe. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried. Item 8.2 is city planning advertising report. Councillor Gusher, thank you. Any concerns, Ms Abbey?
The most controversial item on the list is another application for visitor accommodation at 1 Collins Street,
Ah, yes.
which has an expiry date which has been extended so that will come to the next round.
Thank you.
Again, deja vu, eh?
2 Cross Street?
2 Cross Street.
2 Cross Street has already been approved.
What was that? $2.5 million.
It was the Sacred Heart School
Oh, right, okay.
upgrade, which
Yeah.
was effectively modernising
Yeah.
classroom learning
If
areas.
it was in Sandy Bay, I'd probably think it was just a house extension. But
All right, okay.
Thing, the last one, $75. Alterations to a car park.
I expect this.
It'd be a sign saying don't park here.
The line slightly.
Sign and some
probably
bulldog.
worth $5.
Right, okay, thank you. And so that's coming back to us, right. All right, so I think
When was the
Alderman
May? Is that
Baracus
the-
might have moved. Oh, no. Who moved it?
I offered to, but I think you got Councillor Data.
Okay. Can I, I'll put that, those in favour,
Aye.
those against, items carried. 9.1 is committee action status report. Alderman Baracus, thank you. Those in favour?
Oh, hang on. Just going through the first one, Sustainable Building Program, July 2015.
Very sustainable, isn't it? So what's happening with that?
Okay, well, we've
Director?
endorsed the Sustainable Hobart Action Plan, so we've moved on.
I think that's a matter for Director City Innovation.
And ball on, huh?
I'm
To
still
be fair, it
waiting.
does say Director City Innovation.
I'm still waiting for the report on covering
That is
the
fair.
Street Mall, but that was 15 years ago, so.
And that one about tying horses up to the handrails down there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, somebody received and note that. That was Alderman Barakis. Yep, thank you. Item 10, questions without notice. Any questions without notice? I had about 1 million a few hours ago. Alderman Barakis.
I do have one last, I suppose without providing too much of a preamble to it. As far as dwellings that have been approved and refused by council, I suppose questions of this have been asked already, but can you provide the statistics on what's been approved and rejected by the council proper, as in the elected members, as opposed to things that were approved or rejected by office delegation?
What time frame are you talking about? Sorry, this term of council. Take that on notice.
Thank you. I wouldn't have expected you to have that one off the...
Never know.
Any further questions without notice? Okay, all right. We move now to supplementary item 12. And you can see this is just a decision for local government association, whether we consider this or not. The meeting, can I have somebody move that? Alderman Barakis?
Happy to move it, and also just ask, I suppose I'm just trying to wrap my head, can the director try to just clarify exactly what the I suppose end result of this is, because the wording of it's maybe a little bit clumsy, but is this taking us out of the planning sort of picture, or is it trying to remove our requirement to have those two hats? Because there's a bit of talk about both.
Yes, look, it's a very good question, because you do have to read the suggested motion very carefully. So it is seeking the level of support among councils and identify the relevant consideration and options to propose an amendment to the Act to delete the mandatory requirement for council to act as a planning authority for the purpose of determining applications for a permit to use or develop land, so planning application, and provide as an alternative. So it's saying give council some discretion as to whether it wishes to act as a planning authority for planning applications, and provide as an alternative the establishment of an independent development assessment panel to determine a permit application. So
the effect would be not to take planning away from councils, but to give councils the option to delegate authority to an independent panel.
Yeah, and I think it seeks I suppose advice as to what that independent panel arrangement could be. Now, is it a voluntary? Is it mandatory? Is it mandatory over a certain scale of development? So there are a number of jurisdictions across the country that has development panels in place, and they are mandatory in certain or most jurisdictions where they apply. For example, for a development over a certain size or nature, it's a requirement for them to go before panels. So I think what Bernie is, I suppose, trying to grapple with is the challenge for elected members as advocates at the same time as their role as planning authority and the requirement to assess planning applications according to the provisions of the planning scheme. So by what they're suggesting, by maybe removing the elected members from that process, maybe allow much more consistent decision making, consistent with the planning scheme.
Look, I think I agree with the sentiment of this, and I wouldn't be supporting us endorsing anything sort of on the basis of two lines, but what's being suggested is that it's an investigation into options and whatnot, and that's something I would support. And I think there has been, I think, just in the last 2 years here, there has been times where the requirement to be, the objective statutory planning authority and also being an elected representative of the people of Hobart sometimes does put people in the situation, put councillors and aldermen in a situation where there's sometimes a conflict between those two roles. If you know that people you're representing are in favour of this or against something, but at the same time you've got a statutory responsibility to sort of sit back and look at it, there is sometimes those situations where people are at conflict. I think there's some high profile instances where that might be particularly the case. So given that this is aiming to identify considerations and options, I don't think that then we're being asked to endorse something sight unseen. So that's something I would be uncomfortable with. But if this might start the process of us looking at ways to improve the broader planning system and planning process, I think that it's a good thing. So I'd be supporting it. And
So your motion would be the council support the motion contained in attachment A.
Yep.
Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Dutta, then Councillor Harvey, and then you, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Chair. I have some reservations with regards to this, especially taking it away. I think the local residents, with regards to a particular local issue, would understand the situation better. And sometimes it is important for the democratic process for them to be involved in. And I don't know how the alternative is going to be set up. There is lacking of detail. And so therefore, I am a bit apprehensive and be reserved to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, look, I think there's alternatives to taking away council responsibilities for planning, and that might be, and I think we've also got something in the amendments to the Local Government Act with regard to training for councillors, I think mandatory training. So I think there's opportunity there to improve the knowledge of councillors when it comes to acting as a planning authority. And I think we've got to be careful, as Alderman Baraka's talked about, that sometimes we do step across that divide, and especially when it comes to recommendations for refusal, with regard to, say, tall buildings and things where alternative motions are put to try and, push them across the line. So we have to be careful that it does work both ways. So, we're not rubber stamps, we're also able to make decisions based on the planning scheme, but sometimes we don't necessarily follow the officer's recommendation. So I won't be supporting this, because I think it's really important that rather than take something away or remove council responsibility, that we actually improve their ability to be able to perform the role. So I'll be putting an alternative that we don't support the recommendation here. We don't support the motion. We make a recommendation that we don't support.
Thanks, Councillor Harvey. Alderman Briscoe?
Yeah, look, I'm very similar reasons. I don't think we should support this. It's sort of suggesting a solution to a problem that I don't see exists. I've been around long enough, and a few of us have been around long enough to realise that our community view enables us to exercise the discretion under the planning scheme. And I think we're all quite heightened to that community view. And when we go out and look at, like a few of us did today, World Street, I can't imagine an independent development assessment panel going out there, talking to the neighbours, trying to work out a solution that both are happy. And so I think we function quite well at the Hobart City Council, because we've got a big planning department, we have good professional advice, and they send us their recommendation, which we have sometimes options to change. And if
or improve.
Or
improve.
Improve or disagree with the officers, but we have got discretions. I don't think this seems like a motion coming from a small council who haven't got the sophistication of Hobart City Council Planning Department, or the sophistication of having a separate planning committee like we have. And remember, there was a move a couple of years ago to get rid of this planning committee and make the whole council the planning committee, and we resisted that. So I think we've got to resist this. And I sadly say, but I agree in a way with Councillor Harvey, who said, well, let's find ways to improve.
Why is that sad?
I know, I'm just joking. It's not sad.
Approaching the finish line.
Yeah. So we're coming to the finish line. Let me finish. So I'd say let's not allow the Lord Mayor to vote for this motion.
Sorry? What did you say?
The motion, the council's position on the matter is sought to allow the Lord Mayor to vote according on the matter.
I see.
We're saying, I'm just repeating that. Have I said it
Why are
right?
you bringing
Have I
the
said it
Lord
right?
Mayor in it? No, that's fine.
you.
Councillor Coates?
Look, I'm inclined to think Bernie might have a point here. I don't know that it necessarily would hold for Hobart. I mean, I think one of the things raised by Alderman Briscoe is, you know, ultimately, I mean, when it comes to training, I remember my first day I had to sign a declaration I'll conduct professional development, and you know, I think you learn, and if you aren't getting across it, you then seek out assistance and development for that side of things. But, you know, I think in some ways Bernie have a point. You know, you do have those two hats, and sometimes there are circumstances that arise where it is very difficult. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that I mean, I think this is looking for an investigation, but if you're a smaller council and all of a sudden you've got a sort of weird and wonderful development, or you've got something that's very, very contentious in the area, I mean, must be Meander Valley, I think, where Westbury is. I might be wrong there, but, you know, I couldn't imagine the pressure that all the local government councillors there are under in terms of, now, you know, right or wrong, a prison is a building that is able to be built somewhere in the state. People can debate endlessly as to where it should be built in the state, but if you're sitting there as a planning authority, people out in the community don't necessarily see that. They see that as Councillor Coates making a decision, not Councillor Coates sitting as a planning authority making a decision. So I can understand where Bernie are coming from here, and there will be scenarios where, you know, I don't know that anyone in Hobart has expertise on building a spaceport, but if someone was to propose building one, that's a perfectly legal thing to be able to build, I guess. What do you then do? Does it go to us as a panel of experts? So, you know, I think there might be scenarios. I think it's probably one of those ones where it might be relatively rarely used, but the idea that there is a expertise panel for certain developments in and of itself, from a perspective of elected members not having to wear those two hats, but also from a perspective of actually getting ultimately what is the fairest outcome. I don't know that it's necessarily a bad motion. You know, I think it calls on LGAT to do the investigation. Clearly other jurisdictions have done this, and they've probably done it for reasons. And the investigation, I guess, will hopefully look into how well is it working in those other jurisdictions or not. They might come back and say, look, Queensland are doing it, South Australia are doing it, New Zealand are doing it. On balance, it's no better. So, look, I don't necessarily see this as something we should sort of shoot down at this time.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against?
Aye.
No. Show of hands. Those in favour? Those in favour?
Sorry.
Alderman Barakis and Councillor Coates.
Those against?
Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey and the Deputy Lord
And
Mayor.
I'll put the alternative.
Thank you. We know what that is.
Do you want it in my words or your words?
Those in favour? Those against? Show of hands. Those in favour?
Alderman Briscoe, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Harvey and the Deputy Lord Mayor.
Those against?
Alderman Barakis and Councillor Coates.
Item is carried. That will go to full council on Tuesday of next week. So I'll close the meeting, but thank everybody for their patience and endurance, and it was a good meeting. Good night.